I've been waiting a long time to make this video because the setup just wasn't right. After countless hours of R&D, if you will, I think I perfected the perfect cinema rig for any mirrorless camera and for the Blackmagic pocket cameras. Now, all the parts that I'm using in this video, they're interchangeable depending on what brands you like. But there's a couple of key parts that I'm going to talk about that are going to really help streamline your cinema rig. And the whole point of this rig is to be toolless. So between taking it out of the case and assembling it, I don't have to use a single tool. And a lot of times in a professional setting, you'll put your camera fully rigged up in a doctor's bag or something kind of like that, where it can just live in a padded case fully rigged out. But for this scenario, I need to be able to throw a Pelican case in a small vehicle and still, unpack it, rig it up, and use it however I want. So all of this has to be like taken apart easily and put together easily with no compromise to the actual build. When it comes to the camera, we need a couple of key things in the cage system that we choose. First things first, we're gonna need to have the ability to either attach a NATO rail or have a built-in NATO rail in the cage. And both of my Fuji cameras that are shooting this angle and this angle have built-in NATO rails on top. So that's a great solution for them. But this one did not, so I had to add the NATO rail on top. Then we're also gonna need the cage to have a built-in Arca Swiss. And this Arca Swiss plate on the bottom, while it will attach to most travel tripods, it's gonna give us this really unique addition to our case or to our cinema rig setup. So you gotta have that as well. And as far as I know, all Tilta cages have these characteristics. They may not all have the NATO rail on top. You can obviously purchase one of those, but they all have this Arca Swiss on the bottom, which is clutch. The second most crucial piece of the puzzle is this base plate. Now this base plate here is a bright tangerine left field universal base plate, and it is $300 or $400. I do not suggest buying this unless you have the money to spend. The way that I use this is I have the Manfrotto base plate right here, and that is attached to this quick release dovetail type mount. But honestly, the proper way to use this is to use it with a dovetail. I just don't do that because I don't run dovetails on like my tripods right now. I will eventually. But the key to this base plate, and the thing, like you could switch out the base plate, whatever base plate you want to use. The thing you want to focus on is that it has a Arca Swiss plate that goes perpendicular. So because we have that, we can take the base plate and we can slide our camera on to it like that. And it has this little thing right here. Boom, locks in, and now our camera is solidly on the base plate. And that's amazing. It's so easy to slide your camera on and off, and I personally love that. So next, we're gonna get our rails in our battery plate. So I always just like to place it upside down like this, drop them in, and tighten it down just like that. That way, they're equally spaced and they can go right into the base plate. This is a Core SWX V-mount plate. What I like about it is you got a D-tap here and a D-tap here, so I'm able to not put any D-tap cables into my V-mount battery. I can just simply put the V-mount battery on and the cables stay connected, and I can switch those off as needed. And I'm not like unplugging like 3 cables to take my battery off. So next we will just plop this right in here, and I always bring the screen out a little bit so that I can go just to the point where it touches the screen just barely. You could hypothetically give it a little bit more space if you want to put like a wireless transmitter right here or an audio recorder, anything like that. I do this because I'm not running those things actively, so it just works for me. Notice I don't have any rails coming out the front. You could run longer rails if you wanted to, but I'm often not running a follow focus system for one-man band shoots. So I just focus on the barrel, and I don't need the rails coming out the front. If you wanted them to, you totally could, and that would be your own choice. Next, I will throw on the Core SWX V-mount battery. This is the HyperCore Neo Mini, and this thing is awesome, very powerful, and my favorite part of it is it's gonna give you a time readout, which is just honestly insane. To know the exact amount of time I have left on the V-mount battery, it's really difficult, honestly, to work with other V-mount batteries that don't have this. I'm not just saying that. They did send this battery to me in the base plate or the battery plate, but if I'm looking for batteries, it doesn't matter what V-mount battery I'm looking for it to have a screen that shows me the time, because that's super helpful. So at this point, we've got a little bit of a setup going here. Now we're gonna look at our top handle. And this top handle is, I love using this top handle. It's the Nitze top handle. I don't know exactly the name of it. It'll be linked in the description. But the nice thing about it is it has the NATO clip here. And then as you can see, I have a NATO small rig monitor mount that has the hawk lock system enabled or attached to the top. So honestly, you don't have to have your monitor mount with a NATO rail receiver. That's kind of not like my preference, but the thing I do like about it is that it has the hawk lock, and that's why I got this. This is the only one that they had that had this hawk lock system. And that'll come in handy because when we mount our top handle to the NATO rail on top of our cage, we tighten it down like that. Then we can take our small HD monitor and it just hawk locks right in there like that. So it's honestly so easy to just plop it in and you're good to go. It's kind of unreal that it's that easy. This rig it's pretty solid. And it feels really good. So then I'll just throw on Viltrox locking EF mount. So we can go L mount to locking EF, which is nice. Boom, and then drop on this kind of crazy looking 10 to 18. There we go. So we've got the whole rig right here. Obviously, it's a little tall. If you wanted to make it shorter, you could, because everything's NATO, you could pop the NATO rail off there, pop that off there, and then pop that on. And now you got a nice small, more minimal actual setup. One thing that not a lot of people talk about with these small HD monitors is that the power supply is right here. So I actually have to mount the monitor mount all the way to the, leftmost mounting point so that I can still fit the power supply in here. And that actually reminds me, this is a good time to talk about one of the most useful tools that I have found when it comes to camera rigging, and it's these NPF cheese plates. Now these were 3D printed by myself, and the file is free online. I'll link the file down below. But I printed them out of PETG, if you're familiar with 3D printing, and that allows them to just be a great mounting point. So oftentimes I'll like to run wireless monitor here, and I'll just mount it to the back, and it's super helpful to have it mounted there because I always run power to my monitor with the V-mount. So we're gonna get into that. We'll run cables. And I think a lot of times people may show their cinema rig and it's cool, but then when they attach a bunch of wires to it, it looks less cool. And my goal with this setup was actually so that it doesn't matter what I'm running, it's gonna look good and be efficient, even when there's cables on it. So first cable is the power cable for the 6K. I've got this right angle one, which is super nice. And it's actually running to this D-tap to USB-A little splitter. And the reason I do that is because it actually gives me a better angle on the D-tap. So I like to have that, and then I'll just cable tie this loose cable right underneath here, which is nice. I've got this guy here. So this is just a coiled D-tap to DC barrel locking, barrel connector. So this works perfectly with the small HD monitors. And I'll just run this down below, and then I like to run it to this left side of the V-mount plate. Tons of different versions of these on the market, but I've been using Sprig for a while, ever since Joshua Martin showed them to me. So yeah, that is that. So then I like to thread that in, and I can just loop this cable into it so that it's off my lens mount. It's not gonna be, you know, in the way at all. And then I've got a little cable tie here so I can just loop this through. I actually have 2 different HDMI cables to run with this. I ran into this issue literally yesterday. If I was running my like perfect length right angle HDMI, it was great, but it got in the way of the headphone jack. And if I'm running audio into camera, then I need the headphone jack. So I've got this small rig, thin HDMI cable, and it's good enough. So put that there. I can run it through the sprig. So now I could use another sprig right around here. But yeah, now I've got all the cables ran and everything has power, so we can power it on. And the last thing that I will do with some setups is if I do need XLR inputs to this camera, I'll run this little mini XLR to larger XLR adapter. So that can just plug in right here on the side, and now I've got an XLR port to my Blackmagic 6K. So this is the setup. It is honestly my favorite rig that I've come up with. It's very efficient. You have this nice little under area here that can kind of hide your cables. You've got access to the screen. You also have a spare USB-A, which if you need to use, you can. But the sweet spot is no tools, everything's quick release, and just as easily as I set it up, I can tear it down. And so I think the big thing for me about this rig is like, not everyone can run a like nice little cinema bag and everything. Like sometimes you're flying and you have to pack your kit up. And this rig for me is just perfect because it can pack up very easily. It is able to be put together very easily because there's no tools. And all of the cables are perfect. Like that's one big thing that no one talks about. Like when you're rigging your camera, you have to have the right cables for the job. And sometimes you have to custom buy those cables. But all these cables are pretty solid when it comes to powering this Pocket 6K or Cinema Camera 6K. Their names are so confusing to me. But I will say another helpful tip is if you are rigging a mirrorless style body, most of the time they don't have a fancy power port. So this USB-A can actually run to USB-A to USB-C cable, and then you'll be able to power any of those cameras. But I mean, it's so nice. Like I'm putting very little work into this. I'm just unlatching stuff. It's taking very little time, and that's what I needed. So hopefully this rig is helpful to you, because the more I shoot, the more I realize that, you know, I really do need a nice cinema rig, something that's efficient. And I mean, there's so many people running cameras and camera rigs that I feel like aren't streamlined. They're not super clean. And so that was my goal with this one. And in the small time that I've been ranting about cinema rigs, I've been able to take the whole thing apart and lay it back out like we started. So that's the rig. So yeah, thanks for watching. And if you're interested in watching a different video, YouTube thinks you'll like this one right here.